The sea that morning was unnervingly calm, a flat pane of silver stretching toward the horizon. The kind of stillness that makes you uneasy, like the world was holding its breath. Evelyn Pierce stood by the window, coffee cooling in her hands, watching her husband load the boat. Tom moved with his usual precision, rope coiled neatly, cooler latched shut, sails folded crisp. Their 10-year-old daughter, Lila, skipped beside him, humming off-key. It looked like any other morning. But there was something different in the air, something Evelyn couldn't name. "Did you pack her jacket?" she asked from the porch. Tom looked up, squinting against the light. "Got it right here." He held up the small blue windbreaker, then smiled. "You worry too much, Eve? It's just a weekend sail." Evelyn forced a smile. "That's my job." Inside, the house smelled of toast and salt air. A photo on the counter caught her eye. The three of them at the marina the summer before, Lila's hair wild in the wind. Evelyn had framed it to remind herself that happiness could still exist after loss. Tom's long hours at work had started to erode that feeling. But lately he'd seemed present again, attentive, affectionate. Almost as if he were making up for something. She brushed the thought aside. Outside, the wind shifted slightly, fluttering the sails. Tom crouched to tie a knot while Lila tugged at his sleeve. "Dad, can I steer this time?" He chuckled. "Maybe. If the sea behaves." Evelyn called out, "Be safe." Lila waved both arms. "We will. Love you, Mom." "Love you more," Evelyn replied, but her voice caught on the last word. By noon, the boat, the Celine, had drifted beyond the visible line of shore. Evelyn stayed on the dock long after it disappeared, her hand unconsciously tracing the wedding band she no longer removed. She didn't know why she felt so heavy that day. It wasn't fear exactly, more like a whisper, the kind that lives in your chest and refuses to leave. When evening came and no call arrived, she convinced herself the signal was weak. By midnight she was pacing. By dawn she was dialing the Coast Guard. "They probably just anchored for the night," one officer said gently. Evelyn's breath came shallow. "He always checks in." 2 hours later, a patrol boat reported a sighting, the Celine drifting 5 miles offshore. Evelyn's heart leapt, then froze when the officer added quietly, "No one's on board." The world fractured after that. Search teams combed the water for days. Helicopters circled, divers descended, neighbors prayed. Every lead dissolved into seafoam. There was no wreckage, no footprints, no goodbye. Just silence. The investigators wrote it up as a boating accident, unpredictable winds, possible equipment failure. Evelyn listened, numb, as they said words like tragedy and closure. But when they handed her Tom's belongings, his watch, his wallet, and the small blue jacket Lila never wore, Evelyn felt the world tilt off its axis. She took the jacket home, pressed it to her face, and sat by the window where she'd watched them leave. Outside, the tide rolled in and out like a cruel rhythm, washing over everything but never returning what it took. Days became weeks. The community brought casseroles and condolences. Reporters camped outside for a while, then vanished when the story went cold. Evelyn stayed. At night, she could still hear Lila's laughter echoing down the hall. Sometimes, she'd wake convinced she heard Tom's voice downstairs, only to find the house empty, her reflection in the dark window staring back. 12 years later, that reflection would look the same, except the hope in her eyes would be gone. But that morning, as the sun rose over the water, Evelyn still believed they'd come home. She just didn't know the sea was already keeping their secret. The ocean had given Evelyn nothing. No closure. No goodbye. Only questions that gnawed at her like salt against an open wound. 3 weeks had passed since the Celine was found empty. The official report called it a probable capsize, yet the boat bore no damage, no sign of storm or struggle. Evelyn replayed the details in her head like a prayer turned curse. The tides, the winds, the missing anchor rope, none of it added up. She sat at the kitchen table surrounded by maps, newspaper clippings, and the last photo taken of Tom and Lila at the dock. Their smiles felt like ghosts. "Accidents don't just erase people," she whispered into the quiet. The sound of her own voice startled her. The house had grown so still that even her breathing seemed intrusive. The refrigerator's hum became the only heartbeat she could hear. Every morning, she called the Coast Guard. Every evening, the sheriff's office. The responses blurred into the same polite dismissal. Mrs. Pierce, we've exhausted every lead. I understand your pain, but there's nothing else we can do. But Evelyn refused to stop. She called marinas up and down the coast, left notes on missing persons boards, emailed news outlets that had long moved on to fresher tragedies. Her therapist called it denial. Evelyn called it instinct. Then, on a rain-soaked Tuesday, she opened her voicemail and froze. Among a dozen condolence messages was one she had never noticed before. The timestamp read, Saturday, 6:42 p.m., the night Tom and Lila vanished. Her thumb trembled as she pressed play. Static, a distant hum of waves. Then Tom's voice, low and broken. Eve, listen to me. Don't trust them. Promise me. The message cut off abruptly, replaced by a shriek of wind. Evelyn's knees buckled. The phone slipped from her hand and clattered against the floor. Don't trust who? She whispered. She replayed the message until her phone battery died, each listen burning deeper into her mind. Days blurred into nights. She stopped sleeping, stopped answering calls. She'd stand by the window as if the sea might answer her back. When the sheriff finally visited to check in, he found her surrounded by notebooks, pages filled with coordinates, theories, and sketches of the bay. Mrs. Pierce, he sighed, sometimes the hardest thing to accept is that we may never know. Evelyn met his gaze, eyes rimmed red. Then I'll keep searching until I do. The officer hesitated, pity softening his face. You're only hurting yourself. She smiled faintly. Maybe that's all that's left to do. That night, the sea stormed. Wind howled through the eaves, and the house trembled as if in mourning. Evelyn sat in the dark, clutching her phone, replaying Tom's words again and again. Outside, rain pounded against the windows. For a moment, she swore she saw a figure standing near the dock, tall, soaked, motionless. Her heart raced. She threw open the door, ran barefoot across the mud, shouting, Tom! Only shadows and sea spray answered her. By morning, she stood drenched and shaking, the shoreline empty once more. Evelyn pressed her hands to her face and began to sob, not because she'd lost hope, but because she still couldn't let it die. In the months that followed, she kept the voicemail hidden, listening to it like a ritual. She didn't tell the police. She didn't tell her friends. The world moved on, but she stayed anchored to that one message, certain it meant something, certain he had left her a clue. And when, 12 years later, a young journalist would knock on her door with new questions about that same coastline, Evelyn would finally realize the truth hadn't been buried at sea. It had been waiting for her. 12 years later, the marina hadn't changed, not really. The boats still rocked lazily in their slips, the air still smelled of salt and diesel, and the gulls still circled overhead like they owned the sky. But for Evelyn Pierce, every creak of rope and slap of water against hulls sounded like a memory trying to claw its way back. She came here sometimes without reason. Some called it obsession. She called it loyalty. That morning, the fog rolled in thick and low, veiling the world in gray. Evelyn stood at the edge of the dock, her coat pulled tight, eyes fixed on the spot where the Celine had once been found adrift. The wood beneath her feet was slick with dew. Her reflection rippled beneath her like a ghost she could almost recognize. A voice startled her. Mrs. Pierce. She turned. A man stood a few feet away, mid-30s, messy hair, notepad in hand. His face carried that hungry curiosity only reporters seem to have. I'm sorry to bother you, he said, stepping closer. My name's Ryan Holt. I'm a journalist with the Coastal Ledger. Evelyn's instinct was to walk away. She'd had her share of reporters. Most came for a headline, not the truth. I'm not giving another interview, she said flatly. I'm not here for a headline, he replied quietly. I'm working on a series about cold cases along this coastline. Your husband's disappearance, it's one of them. Her jaw tightened. It wasn't a disappearance. It was an accident, that's what they told me. Ryan hesitated, eyes searching hers. Maybe that's what they wanted you to believe. The words cut deeper than he could have known. Evelyn's fingers trembled slightly as she gripped the railing. What are you implying? He pulled a folded photo from his notebook, a grainy image of a sailboat half submerged in the mist. Your husband's case isn't the only one. 3 other vessels went missing near the same stretch of water over 5 years. All ruled accidental. But the reports don't match the tides, the weather, or the timelines. Evelyn's heart thudded in her chest. Why come to me? Because you never stopped asking questions, Ryan said simply. I read your old statements, the notes you sent to investigators. You saw something they didn't. Or maybe you were the only one who cared enough to look. The fog thickened around them. Somewhere in the distance, a bell buoy tolled, slow, hollow, mournful. For a long moment, Evelyn said nothing. Then she whispered, I have a voicemail. From that night. Ryan blinked. You kept it? I couldn't delete it, she said, her voice thin as glass. Just don't trust them. And I still don't know who he meant. Ryan's expression shifted, not pity, but purpose. Then maybe we find out together. Later, she sat across from him in the small cafe by the docks, the smell of coffee and seawater mingling like old grief. Ryan spread out old maps and coroner reports. Evelyn recognized the handwriting of the original investigator, the same man who'd told her to move on. He pointed to a note in the margin. Search terminated at 40 meters due to unstable conditions. Ryan looked up. I found the diver who wrote this. He's retired now. Lives up the coast. He told me the case was shut down early, before they even checked the full wreck area. Evelyn's stomach turned. Why would they stop? That's what I'm trying to find out. She stared at the map, at the inked coordinates that once defined the end of her world. The fog outside began to lift, sunlight breaking through in fractured beams. For the first time in 12 years, Evelyn felt something stir. Not peace, not yet, but the faint pulse of truth rising from the deep. The drive up the coast took nearly 3 hours. The road wound along the cliffs, where the sea crashed violently below. Wild, untamed, alive. Evelyn sat beside Ryan in silence, her hands gripping her coat as if it were armor. Every mile closer felt like peeling away another layer of denial. Ryan's notes sat between them on the console. Faded police documents, search reports, a photocopy of Tom's last known coordinates. At the top of one page, a single name was circled in red ink. Caleb Niles, retired diver, Coast Guard Search Unit, 2009. Evelyn finally broke the silence. Do you really think he'll talk to us? Ryan's eyes stayed on the road. He already agreed to meet. Said he had something he's been wanting to get off his chest for years. The word confession hung unspoken between them. Caleb's house sat at the edge of a small fishing town. Weathered wood, peeling paint, and the constant sound of gulls overhead. The smell of salt and engine oil filled the air. When he opened the door, Evelyn barely recognized him as the man she'd once seen on television leading the recovery efforts. Time had carved deep lines into his face. His eyes were tired but sharp. Mrs. Pierce, he said softly, as if the name itself carried guilt. You look like you've carried 12 years on your own. I have, she replied. And I'm still carrying them. Caleb nodded and stepped aside. Come in. The inside of the house was cluttered, stacks of logbooks, framed photos of diving crews, oxygen tanks leaning in corners. He led them to a table near the window, where an old map of the bay lay spread out beneath a coffee-stained mug. Caleb sat down slowly. I shouldn't even be talking about this, he began, voice rough. But there's something that's never sat right with me. Ryan flipped open his recorder. You were the lead diver on the Pierce search? Caleb nodded. We went down twice. The second time, I found the Celine's anchor rope cut clean, not frayed, not torn. Cut like someone used a knife. Evelyn's breath hitched. That was never in the report. No, he said, eyes dropping. Because the order came down from above to end the search immediately after I logged that detail. Ryan frowned. Who gave the order? Caleb's jaw tightened. Commander Holloway. Said the case was being reclassified as an accident. Told us to file standard findings and stand down. Why? Evelyn demanded. Why stop when you knew something was wrong? Caleb looked at her. The kind of look that comes from carrying secrets too long. Because someone didn't want us finding what was really down there. The room fell silent. Outside, the wind rattled the window pane. Evelyn's pulse thudded in her ears. What do you mean? Caleb exhaled, long and heavy. I went back on my own a few weeks later. Off record. Couldn't let it go. About 50 yards from where we found the sailboat, I saw the edge of a cabin roof under the silt. An old structure, like part of a shipwreck. But it wasn't on any charts. And someone had sealed it. Ryan leaned forward. You think Tom went there? Caleb met his gaze. I think he knew about it. And I think whatever happened that night didn't start on the water. It started before they even left shore. Evelyn swallowed hard, her throat burning. If that's true, someone lied to me for 12 years. Caleb's eyes softened. Maybe not just you, Mrs. Pierce. Maybe everyone. As they left, the clouds had begun to gather again, thick, gray, heavy. The drive back was quiet, except for the rhythmic sound of rain hitting the windshield. Evelyn stared out toward the sea, her mind replaying Caleb's words over and over. A cut rope. A sealed wreck. A commander's silence. Ryan finally spoke. If Tom knew about that structure, maybe he visited it before the trip. Maybe there's something, or someone, connected to it. Evelyn turned toward him, her voice steady despite the tremor beneath it. Then we start there. She didn't know yet that the cabin they would find next wasn't underwater. It was waiting for them on land, filled with the ghosts Tom Pierce left behind. The storm followed them up the mountain road, sheets of rain slicing across the windshield, thunder rolling like something alive in the clouds. Ryan drove carefully, the wipers fighting a losing battle against the downpour. Evelyn sat in the passenger seat, clutching a folded document Caleb had given them before they left, a rental record under Tom Pierce's name, dated 2 days before the sailing trip. The address led to a remote property tucked deep in the woods overlooking the bay. A cabin Tom had never mentioned. Evelyn stared out the window, her voice barely audible over the rain. He told me he was taking Lila to see the lighthouse that weekend. That was the plan. Not this. Ryan glanced at her. People keep secrets for reasons. We just don't know his yet. Or maybe I just didn't want to see them, she murmured. The road narrowed, gravel crackling beneath the tires. Branches clawed at the car as if trying to keep them from reaching what waited ahead. When they finally pulled up, the cabin stood half hidden by trees, small, gray, and silent. Its roof sagged with age, the porch steps had surrendered to moss. Yet through the grime-streaked windows, Evelyn could sense a life once lived here, briefly, secretly. Ryan killed the engine. You ready? Evelyn exhaled slowly. No. But I've waited 12 years to know. The front door creaked open under Ryan's hand, the smell of damp wood and rot seeping out. Inside, dust floated through thin shafts of light slicing in from broken shutters. The air felt thick, heavy with something more than time. They moved carefully, flashlights sweeping across forgotten relics. A table with 2 chairs, a rusted kettle on the stove, a single cot with a faded quilt. Evelyn's fingers brushed against the wall, faint outlines where photos had once hung. Then she saw it, a stack of old envelopes tied with twine, resting on a crate near the window. Each one was addressed in Tom's handwriting, but not to her. The name on the top envelope read, Marissa. Evelyn froze. Who's Marissa? Ryan looked up. Do you recognize the name? She shook her head slowly. No. Tom never mentioned anyone by that name. Ryan untied the bundle carefully. Most of the letters were undated, written in Tom's familiar, neat scrawl. They spoke of guilt, secrecy, and something he couldn't undo. One line stopped Evelyn cold. She doesn't know yet, but she will. And when she does, everything will fall apart. Her voice trembled. He met me. Ryan's face tightened. Looks like he was hiding more than just a boat trip. Evelyn's hands shook as she reached for the next letter, but before she could read it, Ryan's light caught something on the far wall, a framed photo half covered in dust. He wiped it clean. Tom was in it. Standing beside him was a woman, tall, auburn hair, wearing a red coat. Between them, a teenage girl smiled faintly at the camera. Evelyn felt her stomach drop. That's not Lila. No, Ryan said quietly. That's someone else's daughter. The photo's date read only a week before the sailing trip. Evelyn stumbled back, her hand covering her mouth. He had another family? Ryan studied the photo again. Maybe not a family, but definitely a secret. Lightning flashed outside, illuminating the room for a split second, and that's when Evelyn noticed something else. The floorboards near the bed were uneven, one corner raised slightly higher than the rest. She crouched down, pressing her fingers against the edge. The wood shifted under her touch. Ryan, she whispered, there's something under here. Ryan knelt beside her, prying gently until the board creaked loose. Beneath it, wrapped in a damp cloth, lay a small notebook. The cover was worn, pages warped by moisture, but the handwriting was unmistakable, round, childlike, and heartbreakingly familiar. Lila's, Evelyn breathed. The storm raged outside as Evelyn clutched the diary to her chest, tears mixing with rain leaking through the cracked ceiling. Ryan placed a steady hand on her shoulder. This could tell us what really happened. Evelyn nodded through trembling lips. Then we read it. Every word. But the words inside that little book would reveal far more than either of them were ready to face. The cabin was silent except for the rain. It drummed against the roof in a slow, relentless rhythm, a heartbeat for the dead. Evelyn sat on the floor, Lila's small notebook trembling in her hands. The paper was swollen with moisture, its edges curled and brown. She hesitated before opening it, afraid of what waited between those pages. Ryan crouched nearby, his flashlight steady. Whenever you're ready, he said softly. Evelyn nodded, her voice barely a whisper. I've waited 12 years to hear her voice again. The first page was written in blue ink, blocky letters, uneven and sweet, the way children write when they're still learning the shape of words. June 10th. Dad says we're going to the cabin again. He said it's a secret trip. I'm not supposed to tell Mom. Evelyn's breath caught. He brought her here. Before the sailing trip. Ryan leaned closer. Keep reading. There's a lady here. Dad says she's a friend from work. She talks too much. I don't like when she touches him. Evelyn's hands shook so badly that the paper rustled. Oh God. Ryan gently steadied the pages for her. Take a breath. Today, I heard them yelling outside. The lady was crying. Dad said we're going to the boat tomorrow and that she should leave us alone. I don't think she wants to. Evelyn stared blankly at the words, her mind spinning. Marissa, she murmured. The woman in the photo. Ryan nodded grimly. It has to be. Dad looked scared. He told me not to worry, that we'd have fun on the sail. But I saw her car at the marina that night. She followed us. The next line was smeared, the ink bled by water damage, but one word remained legible, fall. He said it was an accident, but I saw her fall. Evelyn's eyes flooded. She saw someone die. Ryan's voice dropped low. That changes everything. They sat in silence, the storm outside echoing the chaos inside the cabin. Evelyn flipped to the final page. It was dated the night before the disappearance. Dad keeps looking at the water. He says we'll be free soon. I don't know what that means. I miss Mom. And then, beneath that, a single faint word scratched in pencil, sorry. Evelyn's body went cold. She knew something bad was coming. Ryan exhaled, his expression darkening. If Marissa died that night, Tom may have covered it up. But that doesn't explain why he and Lila never came back. Evelyn pressed her palm to the notebook as if she could somehow reach through time. Maybe someone didn't want them to come back. Ryan's gaze drifted to the boarded window, the stormlight flashing across his face. If the woman fell, maybe her body was never recovered. Maybe Tom dumped it, or maybe someone else was watching that night. Evelyn looked up sharply. You think there was a third person? Caleb said something about a sealed wreck near the bay, Ryan reminded her. What if the truth isn't buried in this cabin, but out there, underwater? Evelyn's voice hardened. Then that's where we'll go next. She rose, clutching the diary to her chest. The storm had eased to a whisper, but thunder still rumbled far off, like a warning that the past wasn't done with them yet. Ryan packed the letters and photos from the cabin. We'll take this to the police, he said. Evelyn shook her head. Not yet. They already closed the case once. This time, I want answers before anyone buries them again. She turned toward the window. The rain had stopped, but fog had begun to roll in from the sea, thick, white, endless. In the distance, a faint buoy light flickered through it, pulsing like a heartbeat in the dark. Ryan followed her gaze. Looks like the tide's coming back. Evelyn whispered, then maybe it'll bring the truth with it. The morning after the storm broke cold and gray, the kind of light that seemed to flatten everything it touched. Mist hovered low over the marina, and the water looked like brushed steel, silent, endless, hiding everything beneath. Evelyn and Ryan stood at the edge of the dock, staring at the Celine's old berth. It was empty now, but her imagination filled it. Tom laughing as he untied the ropes, Lila's tiny hand waving goodbye. The memory burned. Ryan adjusted the straps of the oxygen tank on his back. The diver Caleb mentioned called me last night. Said he's willing to meet, but only out there. He pointed toward the open bay. Evelyn's pulse quickened. He found something? Ryan gave a short nod. Something he shouldn't have. They boarded a small charter boat, its motors sputtering to life. The harbor shrank behind them until it was swallowed by fog. The air smelled of salt and rust, and Evelyn's knuckles whitened on the railing as the wind whipped through her hair. Ryan glanced at her. You don't have to go down there. I do, she said. If Lila's truth is buried in the water, then I'll face it. The boat slowed near a cluster of buoys. A man in a wetsuit was already waiting, lean, weathered, his face drawn tight with unease. He introduced himself simply as Mark Jensen. You Evelyn? He asked, pulling off his mask. His eyes flicked to Ryan, then back. You're not the first to come asking about that wreck. Evelyn frowned. Someone else was here? He nodded. A woman few years back. Said she was researching coastal erosion. But she was asking the same questions you're asking now, about the Celine, about Tom Harland. Ryan's tone sharpened. Do you remember her name? Mark hesitated. Marissa. Evelyn's breath hitched. That's impossible. She's dead. The diver looked away. Then someone's using her name. He reached into his duffel and handed Ryan a small waterproof bag. Inside was a photograph, warped by water but unmistakable. It showed Tom standing on the Celine, one arm around Lila. Behind them, half hidden by the sail, was a second figure, a woman with dark hair and mirrored sunglasses. Evelyn's hand shook as she traced the woman's outline. That's her. That's the same woman from the diary. Mark's voice dropped. That wreck you're looking for, it's not far. But I'll warn you, the last time I dove there, something was wrong. The current shouldn't have been that strong. He swallowed. Like the water didn't want to give it up. Ryan checked his gear. We'll take a look. You stay topside. Mark didn't argue. Evelyn and Ryan slipped beneath the surface. The world above vanished, replaced by darkness, pressure, and the hum of their own breathing. Shafts of pale light cut through the murk, revealing drifting seaweed and the glint of old metal. After several minutes, a shadow emerged below, the broken hull of a boat, resting on its side like a skeleton in the sand. The letters on its bow were faint but visible. Celine. Ryan's flashlight swept across the deck. The mast was snapped, the railing twisted. And near the stern, something shimmered. He moved closer, a length of chain, wrapped tight around what looked like a storage hatch. Evelyn's pulse pounded. She pointed to a rusted clasp. Ryan pried it open. The hatch groaned, releasing a cloud of silt. Inside lay a small, corroded box, waterlogged but intact. Evelyn reached for it, her gloves trembling. As she lifted it free, a fragment of fabric floated out, red, faded, unmistakably from a child's jacket. Her vision blurred behind the mask. Ryan touched her shoulder gently. Let's go up. They broke the surface gasping, the fog closing around them again. Mark pulled them aboard, eyes wide. What did you find? Evelyn clutched the box to her chest. Proof, she said. And maybe, the reason they never came home. Mark stared at the object, uneasy. Be careful what you open. Some things were meant to stay down there. Evelyn looked toward the endless gray horizon, her hair dripping, her expression resolute. And some things were meant to surface. The motel room smelled of damp and salt, the scent of everything Evelyn had dredged up from the deep. The corroded metal box sat on the small table between her and Ryan, its hinges crusted white with sea residue. Outside, the wind howled against the glass, carrying the faint cry of seagulls, distant and hollow. Evelyn hadn't spoken since they returned from the bay. Her hands rested on the box like she was afraid it might vanish if she let go. Ryan watched her quietly, giving her time. Finally, she whispered, "She wore that red coat every winter. Said it made her feel brave." Ryan nodded slowly. "You're sure it's hers?" Evelyn's eyes glistened. Lila had a small tear near the sleeve, same spot. She swallowed hard. "I used to fix it with tape because she said she didn't like stitches." The memory hung between them, fragile, human, and cruel in its simplicity. Ryan set a screwdriver on the table. "You ready?" Evelyn hesitated. "Once we open it, we can't go back." He met her gaze. "You already did, 12 years ago, when you never stopped looking." She exhaled, then nodded. "Do it." Ryan wedged the tool under the hinge and pried. The metal shrieked as it broke open. Inside, layers of soaked paper clung together like skin. He lifted them out carefully, revealing a small plastic pouch beneath. Inside the pouch was a folded photograph and a flash drive sealed in tape. Evelyn's hands shook as she took the photo. It showed Tom standing near the boat's stern, sunlight flashing off the water. Beside him stood Lila in her red coat, smiling wide. But behind them, just visible near the railing, was the woman again. Marissa. Only this time, her hand was gripping Tom's wrist. Evelyn's voice cracked. She wasn't just there, she was angry. Ryan frowned. "And Tom looks terrified." He picked up the flash drive, wiping it dry. "We need to see what's on this." They drove through the night to Ryan's office, a converted garage near the docks, cluttered with old files and the smell of coffee gone stale. He connected the flash drive to his laptop. The screen flickered, then opened a single video file labeled July 15th, Celine. Evelyn gripped the edge of the desk as the footage began to play. The camera shook slightly, like it had been set on a shelf. The image showed the Celine's deck at dusk. Tom was pacing, Lila sitting near the railing, her red coat fluttering in the wind. Marissa's voice came from off-screen, angry, slurred with drink. "You said it was over, Tom. You said you loved me." Tom turned toward her, face pale. "Stop shouting. Lila's here." "You used me," Marissa spat. "You think you can just erase me?" Evelyn's heart pounded. She could see the fear in Tom's eyes, not of guilt, but of something spiraling beyond control. Then the camera jolted as someone grabbed it. The image blurred, voices overlapping. A scream. The sound of a splash. And then, silence. The video cut off abruptly. Evelyn sat frozen. "That wasn't Tom who screamed," she whispered. Ryan rewound, slowed the footage. The scream was higher, panicked, short-lived. It was Lila's. Evelyn's breath hitched, her world collapsing inward. She saw it happen. She tried to stop them. Ryan leaned back, voice low. If Lila fell, and Marissa was already overboard, Evelyn finished for him. Then Tom didn't survive trying to save her. For a long time, neither spoke. The only sound was the whir of the computer fan, steady and merciless. Evelyn stared at the frozen frame of her daughter in that red coat, bright against the encroaching dusk. "The water kept their secret," she said softly. "But not forever." Ryan glanced at her. "We're not done. Someone knew about this drive. Someone left that diary. Maybe they wanted you to find it, but why now?" Evelyn's eyes hardened. "Because whoever was there that night isn't finished hiding." Outside, the wind had shifted again. The rain was coming back. And with it, the tide. The storm that had been building all evening finally broke. Sheets of rain pounded against the roof of Ryan's office as Evelyn sat staring at the frozen video frame. Lila's red coat caught mid-motion, blurred by panic and salt. Her hands trembled. "It's not enough," she murmured. "We saw what happened, but not who pushed her." Ryan closed the laptop carefully. We need more than this. Something that connects the pieces. Lightning flashed outside, illuminating the walls plastered with old case photos. For a brief moment, Evelyn saw her own reflection in the window, hollow-eyed, drenched in grief and determination. Ryan rubbed his temples. If that drive was inside the Celine, someone wanted it to stay hidden. Whoever put it there knew the wreck would be found eventually. Evelyn turned toward him. Unless they meant for me to find it. Ryan frowned. Why you? Because I'm the one who wouldn't stop digging. She looked down at the flash drive again, still resting beside the photograph. There's something missing. That video. It cuts too suddenly. Someone edited it. Ryan's brow furrowed. Then there might have been another file. He reconnected the flash drive. This time, he ran a recovery program, the screen filling with scrolling code. After a long moment, a new folder appeared, encrypted, labeled MFD_12. Ryan raised an eyebrow. Messages from the deep, he muttered. Evelyn's pulse quickened. Open it. The folder contained 6 short audio clips, each only a few seconds long. Ryan clicked the first. A faint hiss, then Tom's voice, distorted by static. No one will believe it. I didn't mean for her to fall. Evelyn's eyes widened. Tom. Ryan played the next. They're watching. If you find this, don't trust. Crackle silence. Ryan's jaw tightened. Don't trust who? The third file played a low groan of the ocean, then a whisper. Not Tom's voice, a woman's. You can't save them both, Tom. Evelyn's stomach twisted. That's Marissa. The fourth clip was different, shorter, more chaotic. Shuffling, metal clanging, then a young voice, faint but unmistakable. Daddy, stop. Please. Evelyn covered her mouth as tears spilled down her cheeks. Lila. Ryan reached out, steadying her hand. There's one more, he said softly. The final clip began with deep water sounds, the rhythmic pulse of waves. Then, almost like a breath beneath it, came a single line whispered over and over, growing louder each time. She's still out there. The recording ended. Evelyn stared at the dark screen. What does that mean? Ryan exhaled. Maybe someone survived. Evelyn shook her head. No. We saw the wreck. There's no way. But her voice trailed off. Ryan leaned back, thinking. If Tom recorded those before the boat went down, someone else recovered the files later, and added that last one. Evelyn frowned. To make me think someone's alive? Or to warn you, Ryan said, that whatever started out there isn't finished. For a moment, the power flickered, plunging them into darkness. Evelyn's heartbeat thundered in her ears. When the lights came back, the computer screen had changed. A message blinked in red text across the recovered folder. Stop digging. Ryan's expression hardened. That's not from the files. Someone's remote accessing this system. Evelyn whispered, they're watching us. He yanked the flash drive free, tossing it onto the table. The screen went black again. Rain hammered harder outside, drowning out everything else. Evelyn sat frozen, staring at the dead monitor, her thoughts spiraling. Messages from the deep, she said quietly. It wasn't just the recordings. It's the past, reaching up for air. Ryan stood, checking his phone. We're leaving. There's one person left who might know how those files ended up there, the man who handled the original recovery. Evelyn blinked. You mean Caleb? He nodded. If he was the first diver to find the Celine, maybe he didn't tell us everything. Evelyn wiped her face, steadying herself. Then we find him. As they stepped out into the storm, thunder rolled across the bay, echoing like something ancient stirring beneath the waves. Evelyn looked once more toward the water, endless, dark, and waiting. The rain had stopped by dawn, but the world still felt drowned. Mist clung to the docks like breath on glass. Evelyn and Ryan drove in silence, their headlights cutting through the fog as they made their way back toward the coast, to Caleb's small fishing shack on the outskirts of the marina. Evelyn hadn't slept. The words from the final audio file still looped in her head. She's still out there. Each repetition felt heavier, more personal, like a voice from beneath the tide calling her name. When they reached the shack, the air was thick with the smell of salt and fuel. A single bulb glowed in the window. Ryan stepped forward first and knocked. No answer. He tried again, harder. The door creaked open on its own. "Caleb," Ryan called out. Inside, the place was cluttered: nets, oxygen tanks, half-empty bottles. The kettle still steamed faintly on the stove. Someone had been here recently. Evelyn's eyes scanned the room. Something's wrong. Then she saw it. A photograph pinned above the workbench. Caleb stood smiling beside another woman, older, gray-haired but familiar. Her eyes were unmistakable. "Wait." Evelyn stepped closer. "That's Marissa," Ryan finished, his voice low. Only the name didn't make sense. The woman in the photo looked decades older than the one in the footage. Ryan frowned. Maybe a sister? Or... A voice behind them finished the thought. A mother. They spun around. An older woman stood in the doorway, raincoat dripping, a small revolver trembling in her hand. Her face was worn but composed, grief and fury fused together. Evelyn froze. "Who are you?" The woman's lips trembled. "I'm the one you've been looking for. Marissa's mother. Helen Cole." Ryan raised his hand slowly. "We just want to talk." Helen's gaze flicked to Evelyn. "Talk? After what your husband did to my daughter?" Evelyn's heart pounded. "You don't understand." "Oh, I understand." Helen stepped closer, her eyes wild. "He took her out on that boat. Promised her everything. Then he left her in the dark. When I went to the police, they said it was an accident. But accidents don't leave chains around hatches." Ryan's voice was calm. "You were the one sending messages." Helen's expression faltered. "You found them?" "The recordings," Evelyn said softly. "You recovered the flash drive." Helen hesitated, then nodded. "Caleb found the wreck years ago. I paid him to bring up whatever he could. I wanted proof. But when we opened the files and saw Lila's coat, I couldn't destroy it. So I made sure someone would find it, someone who deserved to know." Evelyn's breath caught. "You sent it to me." Helen's voice softened. "You needed to see who he really was." "But you don't know what happened that night," Evelyn said, stepping closer. "Tom didn't kill your daughter. He died trying to save Lila." Helen's grip on the gun wavered. "Was that man?" "No," Evelyn cut in. "I saw the video. Marissa fell first. And my daughter, she tried to stop them. Tom went after them both." Her voice cracked. "He never came back." Silence filled the shack, heavy and raw. Helen's eyes glistened. "Then why send me nothing? Why leave her to rot down there?" Evelyn's tears finally broke. "Because we both lost everything." For a long moment, neither woman moved. The sound of the waves crashed softly outside, steady, rhythmic, like the world breathing again after years of holding it in. Helen finally lowered the gun. Her hand shook as she whispered, "I waited 12 years for someone to tell me the truth." Evelyn's voice trembled. "Then let's find it together." Thunder rolled distantly, not from the sky this time, but from the sea. The tide had begun to rise when they reached the old pier. The wind clawed at their coats, the waves slamming against the pylons with relentless rhythm, as if the ocean itself wanted to speak. Evelyn tightened her scarf, glancing back at Helen, who clutched a worn leather satchel close to her chest. Inside it was the diary, the flash drive, and the last recording Caleb had recovered before disappearing 2 nights ago. Ryan followed behind, his flashlight slicing through the thick coastal fog. "Are you sure this is where it happened?" Helen nodded slowly. "The current always brings it back here. Every year, same time, same tide." They stopped at the edge of the dock. The water churned black below, flecks of moonlight glinting on its surface like scattered glass. Evelyn could almost hear the echoes, screams swallowed by wind, wood splintering, a final breath before silence. She turned to Helen. "You said Caleb found something else." Helen hesitated, her eyes fixed on the waves. "He found a second chain. Not attached to the wreck, attached to something buried deeper." Ryan frowned. "Another body?" Helen's face hardened. "Another secret." Before Evelyn could ask more, a sudden crack split the air, the sound of wood giving way. The far end of the dock collapsed into the sea. Ryan pulled them both back just in time. The flashlight slipped from his hand and vanished beneath the surface. Evelyn's pulse raced. "We can't stay here." But Helen didn't move. She stared at the water as if drawn by something beneath it. "It's calling again," she whispered. "Can't you hear it?" Evelyn followed her gaze and froze. Through the swirling tide, faintly illuminated by bioluminescent plankton, a shape emerged. A tattered red coat drifted just below the surface. Her breath caught. "Lila!" Without thinking, she stepped closer. The water shimmered, the coat rising and twisting as though reaching toward her. For a moment, she thought she saw a hand beneath it, pale, still, yet impossibly alive. Ryan grabbed her arm. "Evelyn, stop." But Helen was already moving. She dropped to her knees at the edge of the dock, tears spilling freely. "Marissa," she whispered. "I'm here." Then, from somewhere deep within the crashing surf, a metallic glint appeared, something tethered to the coat. Ryan knelt, reaching down with a hooked pole, and managed to drag it closer. It wasn't a body. It was a waterproof container, dented, corroded, but intact. They pried it open with trembling hands. Inside was a camera. Evelyn's throat tightened. Another recording. They took it back to the shack, the storm building around them like an omen. Lightning flickered across the horizon as Ryan connected the camera to the laptop. The screen blinked to life. Static. Then darkness. Then a face. Evelyn's heart nearly stopped. His hair was wet, eyes wild, breath shaking. Behind him, the cabin rocked violently. "If anyone finds this," his voice broke through the static, raw and desperate. "Tell them I tried. I didn't kill her." She jumped. She said the sea was her home now. "I went after her, but the current took us both. Lila, if you're seeing this, forgive me. I couldn't save her." The image shook, then fell sideways. The sound of rushing water filled the speakers before the screen went black. Evelyn pressed a hand to her mouth. For years, she had lived with the weight of suspicion, the gnawing belief that her husband had hidden something unforgivable. But now, the truth was worse. He had died trying to do the right thing. Helen sat quietly across from her, face illuminated by the flickering screen. The anger had drained away, replaced by something hollow. "He tried to save them both," she whispered. Evelyn nodded, tears streaming. "And no one ever knew." For a long while, none of them spoke. The wind howled through the gaps in the walls, carrying the scent of salt and decay. Then Ryan leaned forward, his expression grim. If that was the last recording, what did Caleb mean about a second chain? As if in answer, a deep rumble echoed from the marina. Not thunder, but something shifting beneath the waves. Evelyn's eyes widened. "We're not done yet." Helen clutched her satchel tight, the old grief in her voice sharpening to resolve. "Then we finish it tonight." Outside, the tide surged higher, swallowing the lower docks. The storm roared with renewed fury, the final tide rising, not to cleanse, but to uncover. The storm raged through the night like an unburied ghost. Waves slammed against the pier, tearing through what was left of the old docks, dragging fragments of wood and rope into the black abyss. The lanterns they'd hung outside the shack flickered wildly, their light dancing across Evelyn's face as she stared at the camera, still frozen on Tom's last frame. His eyes haunted her. Eyes that once looked at her with warmth now stared back with the weight of a man already drowning. Ryan was pacing, phone in hand, trying to call for help. No signal. Just static. Helen sat by the window, whispering to herself, a prayer or a confession, Evelyn couldn't tell. Then came the sound. A hollow clang, somewhere outside, metal striking metal. Evelyn looked up sharply. "The dock." Ryan grabbed the flashlight. "Stay here." But she didn't. She followed. The rain hit her like needles as she stepped out, the cold slicing through her coat. The beam of the flashlight cut across the water, and there it was. The buoy. A new one, dragged in by the rising tide, clanging against the wreckage of what once was the Mariner's Rest. Helen came stumbling behind them. That buoy wasn't there before. They waded into the shallows. The water swirled around their knees, thick with seaweed and foam. As Ryan pulled the buoy closer, he froze. There's something chained to it. It was a metal box, small and rusted, the links twisted tight around the buoy's frame. Evelyn's hands shook as she helped pry it free. Together, they hauled it onto the dock. Ryan cracked it open with a crowbar. Inside, another waterproof case, this one newer. Helen's breath caught. That's Caleb's. Evelyn's heart lurched. She knelt beside it, flipping the latch. Inside was a single envelope, sealed in plastic, and a small silver locket. The envelope was marked, "To the one who still waits." Evelyn's name was written below. Her hands trembled as she opened it. The letter inside was short, written in Caleb's rough handwriting. "I found what your husband tried to bury, not a secret, but a promise. He anchored the wreck so it wouldn't drift, said one day, the truth would rise on its own. If you're reading this, I didn't make it back. But the sea never forgets. Look beneath the hull. You'll find them both." Evelyn's throat tightened. The words blurred as tears mixed with rain. Ryan's voice was low. He must have gone diving after this message. That's why he never came back. Helen touched the locket, her voice breaking. Marissa had one just like this, her mother's. Without another word, Evelyn stood. The storm was reaching its peak, but she didn't care. She moved toward the end of the pier, where the remains of the mariner's rest broke the surface like a ghost ship clawing for air. Ryan shouted after her, but she didn't stop. The water surged around her waist, cold and merciless. The wreck creaked, barnacles clinging to what used to be polished wood. Evelyn ran her fingers over the splintered hull, and there, beneath a layer of coral and rope, she felt it. A cross-shaped engraving. The same one Tom carved on their anniversary, their secret mark. And below it, two shapes, small and still, preserved by the salt. One larger, one smaller. Evelyn gasped, a sound between grief and release. "Oh, Tom." Helen's sob echoed behind her. "Marissa." Ryan approached slowly, head bowed. They were together the whole time. Lightning split the sky, and for an instant the wreck glowed, a cathedral of ghosts beneath the waves. Evelyn sank to her knees in the surf, her tears indistinguishable from the rain. "He didn't abandon her," she whispered. "He tried to bring her home." The tide began to retreat, the waves gentler now, as if the sea itself was finally letting go. By morning, the storm had passed. The police arrived, the remains recovered, the mystery officially closed. But for Evelyn, there was no closure, only quiet understanding. At the marina office, she stood with Helen, both women watching the sunrise bleed across the horizon. Helen broke the silence. "You think the sea remembers?" Evelyn smiled faintly, holding the locket tight in her palm. "The sea remembers everything. We're the ones who forget." A gull cried overhead. The tide rolled in soft and low, a final sigh from the deep. As Evelyn turned to leave, the sunlight caught something near the dock, a red fragment tangled in seaweed. She picked it up. The corner of Marissa's coat. Evelyn closed her eyes, a calm she hadn't felt in 12 years washing over her. Then she whispered to the wind, "They're home now." The sea shimmered in response, a glint of silver beneath the waves, before swallowing the wreck once more. End of story. Cyclone, the past had been buried beneath the tide, but in the end, truth, like the sea, always rises.